you could see here that all these dates that were mentioned, especially the one by Kathleen Kenyon, um, point to the fact that there was a time where, as the biblical account states, that she actually recognized that there was indeed a fire that happened after the earthquake or after the walls were uh, torn down. After the walls came tumbling down, there was red and white streaks, red black streaks that were on the walls, meaning there was a massive fire that occurred. All this timing that went on accurately points to the fact that all the biblical accounts, specific accounts, actually matched everything that was excavated. This was both proven by archaeologists and biblical scholars. So it is true. The story is indeed true. We can rest on the fact that all these stories in the Bible that seem to be mysteries actually happened. And we could rest in the fact that we need not worry about the science of it because we just need to trust. Bible says it, then that settles it. That's the mindset that we all should have. And true to the fact that there are so many general reasons to believe the Bible is true, although we can't go into them now, there is no obvious reason to believe this account is not true, and there are a number of reasons to believe that it is. So, therefore, we aren't that um, we're not going to be that uh, low IQ people if we accept this account of the fall of Jericho as true and take lessons from it about how God acts in the world. But the second question that we want to tackle today is how could it be right for a just, holy, and loving God to destroy the city and all its inhabitants? God instructed the Israelites to utterly destroy the city. The Hebrew word for this is harem. It means utterly devoting something to God. So there is a sense here that there is a reason why God wanted the city of Jericho and its inhabitants to be destroyed, because there is a an offering that is being done. That although it's hard to swallow that God could uh, command such a thing, uh, it's important that we face up to it. And sometimes God's instructions seem indistinguishable from genocide, and it's a major stumbling block to faith. In fact, a lot of the modern atheists would point to this particular story in the Bible as something that would not let them or allow them to have and put their faith in a God that of the Old Testament. And um, there is an American commentator, David Howard, and he gives this on Joshua. He said, first thing that relates to this is God's right to demand anyone's life. See, God has the right to take one's life, to give it, and to then to take it back. Because we all have sinned. We have all fallen short of God's glory. And so the wages of sin is death. And so God is not unjust in taking anyone's life. Um, in fact, uh, David Howard said this. He said, thus on this level, the Canaanites only received what all peoples then and now deserve, and any peoples who have been spared are so spared only by God's grace. So, this is a consistent argument of Bible scholars that life belongs to God, and it is His to give, and it is His to withdraw if it becomes necessary. Um, uh, Another commentator, Tremper Longman, wrote, the instruction to execute judgment against a whole nation, annihilating women, children, and nursing babies, evokes revulsion and taxes our comprehension of the dimensions of human sin and guilt. Yet we must be reminded that the earthly life is God's to give and His to take as well. So, um, for us today, you might be struggling with this story. and say that how could that be? Well, all I can say is since God has this right to give and to take life away, then he isn't unethical when he uses it right, when he uses this right. The second thing relates to God's reason to demand the Canaanites' life, the Canaan people lives. One reason that the Bible gives for God to act in this way is because the Canaanites would be a corrupting influence on the people of God. Uh, and it's also because of their extreme sin. Um, they have fallen into extreme sin, the people of Canaan. And so during this time, the scholars were pointing out the fact that child sacrifice were particularly common among the Canaanites and their descendants, and ritual prostitution was also common. And if you remember the story of Noah and the flood in Genesis 6, it says there that the Lord saw the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. See, every intention, only evil continually. So you can't be any more blacker than that. The same thing applies to the destruction of Jerusalem by the Babylonians, and then later on by the Romans after the crucifixion of Jesus. There is extreme sin which God has to deal with because He's a holy and just God. He cannot just ignore sin in His presence. So, a third and final question then would be this: is this then, this story, a true picture of faith? See, the story of Joshua and the walls of Jericho is a great picture of God enabling His people to break through a seemingly insurmountable obstacle by faith. And there's this famous um, African American gospel song, Joshua Fit the Battle of Jericho, and the walls came tumbling down. There's also a phrase there that says, "Go blow them horns, Christ Joshua." And this is what really strikes me in the civil rights movement back then. Dr. Martin Luther King um, said that it's okay to march peacefully, but then that's not happening nowadays. What's going on is rioting is going on, looting is going on. And if you notice, even in the story, God instructs the Israelites after the walls come tumbling down that they would charge into the city, set the city on fire, therefore leaving behind all the grain that was in the city, so that those grain would be part of their sacrifice. It would be their sacrifice to God as an offering to God and His victory that that's given them. See, here God even instructs His own people to not loot or take advantage and destroy, instead, to destroy things that could be offered to Him as a sacrifice. So, Dr. Martin Luther King got it right when he told people back then in the movement that they were going to break through, figuratively, the walls of Jericho. They were going to break through this and the walls will come tumbling down. And what they were fighting for, which is racial injustice and segregation of blacks, that they were going to someday see the promised land. And we might see it in our lifetime, that there will be no more racial injustice. But that is not a guarantee. In fact, God only guarantees to us what the gospel guarantees, and that is life eternal, and life uh, that is lived in the presence of an almighty, sovereign God who takes care of us. And this is what I would like for us to conclude with. That we might not understand everything that is going on in the world right now. You might be struggling with the fact that there might be a second wave coming, especially what we see in Quebec, the province of Quebec, when the children came back to school. The, there seems to be a spike again in COVID-19 related infections. And this could very well happen to us next week. There's start of school here in Ontario, and we might see this happening. And you might say to yourself, what is going on? Is this going on for the next year or so? And maybe a third, second wave, a third wave that's going on. When will we come back to normal? And when can I have a job again? When can I have a gathering again for the long-awaited wedding or party or gathering that we all long for? And for mega churches, when we can we all gather again as a group, as a big group of people? When can we watch again the Raptors as they are looking into winning the series with the Celtics? When can we watch them live again in the playoffs and eventually in the finals? See, all these questions come to mind, but um, biblical history tells us that during the time of King Ahab, the walls of Jericho was once again rebuilt. It shows the disregard of God's warning that uh, there will be a curse if these walls of Jericho will be rebuilt again. But then, as we study this together, that um, that in spite of the city that is marked for destruction, there is a God who desires to deliver you, to deliver us, those who decide to trust in Him. Rahab is a picture of God redeeming a person or a people who put and place their trust in God. It's not because God doesn't love the world, but the world actually doesn't love the God who created them. And there's also a safety, an oasis in the midst of a world that is in rebellion against God, that the righteous run into and be safe. There's the beautiful picture in, in Jesus triumphantly entered Jerusalem when he said that I wanted to protect them. I wanted to protect them. I think about right here where we live. Saw a picture one time of a mama hen who was burned. But then when they look at underneath them, there were the little babies that were still living. God wants to save us. God wants to rescue us. Today we will take communion and we will be reminded about that again. Let's just think about this. That in the midst of a world that's marked for destruction, there is a place of safety